All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having an incredible week. We got another major NBA trade today, second one involving the Raptors as well, as Pascal Siakam is headed to the Indiana Pacers. We're going to break that trade down from every angle, including some of the teams who missed out on Pascal Siakam. Then we're going to talk about Joel Embiid solidifying his first place position in the MVP race by outplaying Jokic and beating the Nuggets last night. Specifically, he was incredibly impressive on the defensive end of the floor. I want to kind of break that concept down a little bit. And then at the end of the show, like I said, we would, because the Clippers have made it through the Timberwolves and Thunder games, we're going to place them in our contender tiers. We're going to do a deep dive on the Clippers and talk about where they fit among the list of contenders. Also, we did talk about doing a mailbag today, but we're going to push that one more day because the Siakam trade kind of threw off my schedule today. So keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. I'll look through all three shows this week and put together a nice mailbag for tomorrow's show. And then don't forget that later tonight, after the final buzzer of Mavs Lakers on ABC, we'll be going live on YouTube. So I hope to see you guys there as well. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel. It would mean a lot to me if you guys would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions. Also, have any of you guys had a bad ticket buying experience? I remember one time I bought a ticket to go see LeBron when he was with the Cavs back when I was living in Charlotte. And when I got to my seat, the visibility was just terrible. And I remember being like, man, I wish I would have known what this is like. Like, I probably wouldn't have bought the ticket, right? Like, it can be a frustrating process between hidden fees, not really knowing where your seat is, just complication throughout the ordering process. This is where I want to talk to you guys about Game Time. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see your view from the seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Also, all-in pricing, so you know your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. There's no surprise waiting at the end of the line, and it's a super easy process. You can buy tickets in seconds with only 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code HOOPS, that's HOOPS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's talk some basketball. So Pascal Siakam headed to the Indiana Pacers. Bruce Brown is the trade piece going back from the standpoint of salary filler. And then there's 3 first-round picks in the deal. That said, I absolutely love this deal for Indiana on a couple of different fronts. First of all, the 2 first-round picks that are coming from Indiana that were Indiana's own picks, Indiana's going to be good. Like, they're going to be a mid to late first round pick. Those are picks that have a significantly higher miss rate, right? So like that part. And then I guess the third pick is the worst out of OKC, the Clippers, the Jazz, and the Rockets. Like, that's probably going to end up being OKC's pick. So that's another late first rounder. So basically 3 most likely mid to late first rounders, and Bruce Brown, who's a good player. Bruce Brown's a good player, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit because I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded again, or if they end up moving a different one of those guys, because the Raptors have a bunch of players at that position. But that was the position that the Pacers were in. They have so many guards: Tyrese Haliburton, Buddy Hield, Ben Mathurin, TJ McConnell, Andrew Nembhard. Aaron Nesmith kind of can function as a 2 as well. Does a lot of the same stuff Bruce Brown does. So like, literally, they just had a redundancy at that position. That's not to say Bruce Brown's not good or not valuable, but he's less valuable to the Pacers than Pascal Siakam is to the Pacers, right? Obviously, not to mention Pascal's just a much better player. But specifically, Pascal's an awesome basketball fit with the Pacers. And I want to dive into that concept for a little bit. Let's start on the offensive end of the floor. So, as I've said so many times on the show, I think Tyrese Haliburton is a transcendently great offensive engine. I think he's on that trajectory with the Steph Currys, the Nikola Jokic's, the Luka Doncic's, the singularly transcendent offensive engines that you just put out on the floor and it's like a guaranteed great shot, like 90% of the possessions that he's on the floor, right? Well, Pascal Siakam helps him both on and off the ball. I want to start on the ball first. And in this case, meaning when Pascal Siakam has the ball. He gives an additional type of offensive shot creation. Once you go past that, like a lot of the guys on the Pacers are good advantage extenders. Like Miles Turner can hit pick and pop jump shots and he can attack closeouts and things along those lines. But he's not a guy you're just going to dump the ball to and have him be an offensive engine. Obi Toppin is almost entirely a transition run out guy and a backdoor cutter, right? That's pretty much what Obi Toppin did in this offense. Buddy Hield, a lot of ghost screens going to the 3-point line. He's expecting to get set up with high quality shots. There really isn't another guy on the roster who's a high level individual shot creator. Not only is Siakam that, he's a very different version of that. Haliburton is very much like, he can beat switches, he's a great ISO player, but he's very much like a manipulator of the defense to generate advantage situations for other players. That's his best trait. He's a great pull-up shooter, a really quick guard with an excellent floater and great touch around the rim with his like scooping layups and things like that. So I don't want to act like I don't want you guys to think that I'm underplaying how good Tyrese is as an on-ball scorer, but his best trait is his ability to set up people with advantage situations, right? Well, Pascal Siakam is much more of that classic mismatch attacking forward, right? Posting up. He's getting 1.12 points per possession in post-up situations, including passes. Among all the players in the league who have done it at least 150 times, only Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Anthony Davis have been better. So he's literally been one of the very best post-up shot creators in the league this year. The best. That's not one of the three Titan centers that we have in the league, right? Isolation situation. Siakam gets 1.08 points per possession. That's 12th out of 50 players in the league who have run at least 75. And then a lot of talk about the jump shot with Pascal Siakam. And don't get me wrong, it's not good, but it's not really all that bad either. Like he's 55% on in effective field goal percentage on unguarded catch and shoots. That's really not that bad. That's 1.09 points per shot. Like, so if some team decides to leave him open, like he's going to be able to make them at a decent enough clip, right? That's not a shot that's going to necessarily hurt your offense. And he's a solid closeout attacker. He gets 1.01 points per spot up possession. That's firmly in the middle. That's firmly average. So again, it's appropriate to bring it up in the sense that he's not a flamethrower, but he's not a guy that's necessarily going to hurt you with his lack of shooting either. But where I'm most excited with Siakam on the Pacers is off the ball. Pascal Siakam is one of the very best transition players in the NBA. He's made 78 field goals this year in transition. That's the 9th most in the entire NBA. And like we all know, Tyrese is an excellent kick-ahead passer. He's constantly, that's how Obi Toppin is basically made himself a functional starter for the Pacers based purely on the fact that he's a good cutter and a guy that can run out in transition, right? And that he provides real vertical spacing, right? That's something Siakam's going to come in and do right away at a really high level. Also a very good cutter. Scored on a cut 34 times so far this season. It's like the 32nd most in the NBA, I think, which is definitely a lot, right? Like not one of the top cutters in the league, but a very good cutter. He's also set 82nd percentile for efficiency cutting. And again, with Tyrese Haliburton, running your lane in transition, cutting with real vertical spacing out of the weak side corner. These are things that are highly, highly valuable alongside a passer of his caliber. It's another form of spacing. When you combine that with the pretty solid unguarded catch and shoot shooting, I don't think he's going to be a bad off player for them at all. That said, we haven't even got to the defensive end of the floor. This is a team that severely lacked in interior physicality in defense, right? Miles Turner's a really, really good defensive player as like a shot blocker, right? And he can do a little switching as well. The thing with Miles, though, is what we've seen around the league is like it's no longer protecting the rim with your one guy. Like it's that 4-5 is so important. And the main reason why is as pull-up jump shooting has become more and more prevalent in the league, your big man's had to come higher and higher up to the level of the screen, which creates an opening on that backside, right? And that's where the low man comes in. The guy that can tag the roller in pick and roll situations. Help at the rim in the event that your big man has to step up and help elsewhere, right? Cleaning up the defensive glass. Extra efforts when a guy pump fakes and gets the big man off the ground. That second wave is typically the low man. Rotating back out to the perimeter. You need an athlete that can bother things on the inside and then do, 2 steps and a drop step and close out and get a good contest on a corner 3-point shooter. These are all things that Siakam is going to be a massive, massive upgrade for this team. The entire physical profile of the team changes with this move. I would presume they might stay with Buddy Hield. It could be Ben Mathurin, but if it's Haliburton and it ends up being something along the lines of like a Aaron Nesmith, Siakam, Turner front line, that just becomes way more physically imposing than what we've seen elsewhere this season, right? So like it just adds a new dynamic to the defensive physicality of the team. By the way, he's a great rebounder too. Averaged 8 rebounds a game over the last 5 years, Pascal Siakam. And the Pacers are a bottom 5 defensive rebounding team this year. Siakam's also a very good offensive rebounder, so that'll help them on that end of the floor as well. But bottom line is like fundamentally increases your physical profile on both ends of the floor, improves your defensive rebounding, improves your rim protection and overall defensive capability, gives you an additional shot creator that can add some variety to what you do offensively, not to mention just making Tyrese Haliburton's job easier. And then in off-ball situations, he is a seamless fit with Tyrese Haliburton. Absolutely love the move. Didn't really have to give up anything of real consequence. Round of applause to the Pacers. Really, really well done. Wouldn't be surprised if they're not done either. Wouldn't be surprised if they look to shore up that 2 or that 3 spot before the deadline as well, although salary matching is a little tough there, so we'll see how that goes. On the Raptors front, they already have RJ Barrett and Gary Trent Jr., who both, like RJ Barrett can play the 3, can play the 2, but to me, from a size perspective, and he's actually a pretty good point of attack defender, I look at him more as a 2. Gary Trent Jr. is a decent point of attack defender, who's a pretty solid offensive player as well, so different archetype. Bruce Brown, obviously different than both of them, but very good point of attack defender, a guy that can provide some rim pressure and transition, decent ball handler, really versatile kind of Swiss Army knife type of player. But they all kind of play that 2-3 hybrid type of spot, right? And so, although Gary Trent Jr. is more of a 2. So the question is like at that point, do you want to have, 2 of those guys making 20 plus million? You know what I mean? And especially if you don't plan on playing both of them together. Bruce is having a little bit of a down shooting year, and so is RJ Barrett. So, although he's been shooting really well with the Raptors, RJ Barrett's been playing so well with the Raptors that they may kind of prioritize him. But point being, it might be that Bruce Brown is available now at the deadline in a way that he might not have been otherwise. If he was just on the Pacers, not sure the Pacers would have got rid of him, but they had to get rid of him to get Pascal Siakam. The Raptors might have more need for whatever they could get back from Bruce Brown than Bruce Brown himself. I personally, as someone who roots for the Lakers, would absolutely love to have Bruce Brown. D'Angelo Russell is a redundancy on the Lakers, but he's actually a good basketball player. He makes an affordable salary, makes less than $20 million a year. Excellent passer, excellent off-ball shooter. He's a guy that could actually kind of provide some connectivity and leadership for that Raptors team. I think D'Lo is very much a middle of the ground asset. Like he's a guy that like some teams would view as a negative asset and some teams would view as a positive asset, but only slightly so in either direction. And no one would really complain if he was in the trade if they were getting something else that's more of like the sweetener, right? So like, what if the Lakers were to give him like, D'Angelo Russell and Jalen Hood-Schifino and Maxwell Lewis? That's like literally a first-round pick from last year who hasn't been able to play for the Lakers, right? And then Maxwell Lewis, an interesting little undrafted guy, although I think he might have been a second-round pick if I remember correctly. And then D'Lo, a veteran that could help, and maybe they throw in some second-round picks or something like that. Or maybe if it push comes to shove and the Lakers really want him, they could throw in a first-round pick because they have one that they could trade. But Bruce Brown to me is a guy that like is a really useful playoff weapon. Specifically, the reason why I'd be so excited with him on the Lakers is he would just add an entire physical element to this team that they haven't had since Alex Caruso was on the roster. You can imagine a lineup that has an engaged LeBron James in his playoff mode with Anthony Davis and Bruce Brown on the floor just being so much more physically imposing than some of these lineups that we've seen from the Lakers this year. Although his shooting has been a little bit of an issue, which I obviously would be worried about a little bit for the Lakers' sake. But he did make a lot of threes in the postseason last year. But Lakers aren't the only team. There are a bunch of other teams that could potentially look at Bruce Brown as an option. He's going to be a little bit tough to match salaries and to afford, especially if the Raptors want draft compensation. So it'll be interesting to see if any team gets in on that race, but he's a guy I'd keep an eye on. The other team I wanted to look at here is the Golden State Warriors, because the Golden State Warriors kind of felt like the clubhouse favorite for Siakam. At least that's what it seemed like a couple of weeks ago. And now he's off the table, right? And I don't think they can afford Lauri Markkanen. And Jeremy Grant, I'm not even sure if he's going to be available. I'm not even sure if he wants to go play for a winning team. I'm not even sure he wants to leave Portland under any circumstances. So I'm not really sure what the deal is there. And so the options are getting loose. But at the end of the day, like what I look at with Golden State, we've talked about this issue before, but to me, you're trying to make one last run at this thing with Steph and Draymond as your brackets at the 1 and 5. I think Klay at the 2 is fine as long as your 3 and 4 are really good basketball players. And so I was actually looking at this today, and I wonder, because there's a specific guy that I have my eye on here from the Brooklyn Nets. What I would do is I'd call Brooklyn and I'd offer them Andrew Wiggins and I'd offer them Jonathan Kuminga and I'd offer them Moses Moody and I'd offer them draft compensation and I'd ask for Mikal Bridges and Dorian Finney-Smith. And I know that we haven't really heard much about Mikal Bridges being available, but he's now in his late 20s. And the Brooklyn Nets thing has been a pretty clear description of the fact that Mikal Bridges is not going to be like a foundational franchise altering type of talent. He's a really, really, really good role player who makes a lot of money because really, really good role players cost a lot of money. Jonathan Kuminga has the potential to be a franchise altering player, right? And certainly has a higher ceiling than that's not to say he will reach that ceiling, but certainly has a higher ceiling than what Mikal Bridges has been able to reach here heading into his late 20s. This is a guy that, if you've got those two guys, that's two guys that can both defend on the perimeter at a really high level, that can both shoot the basketball. Mikal Bridges provides some legitimate second side creation. He's not an excellent passer, but he's a good pull-up jump shooter. He's a guy that can score when you put him on an island a little bit. Now we're looking at a lineup with, you're foregoing your future, right? You're moving on from Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga. That's obviously a significant loss. I think the team is probably done with Andrew Wiggins at this point with everything that's gone down since he left the team last year. He'd be basically functioning as salary filler in that situation. If you're Brooklyn, you're getting a legitimate potential future all-star in Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins, who's a starting level NBA wing, right? So you're turning two wings into two wings, except for one that you don't really have much use for, but Jonathan Kuminga, who has legitimate long-term potential. It's just more of a forward-thinking move in terms of Brooklyn's perspective. Then I'm working out there with Steph and Klay, with two excellent perimeter defenders, an additional shot creator in Mikal Bridges, slots Klay Thompson on easier, achievable perimeter defense roles, and Draymond Green anchoring things in the front court. That to me is an example of a type of deal that I would make. But I think the Warriors need to be aggressive. I think they need to make something significant change here. One of the nice things about that specific deal too is it keeps Chris Paul in the fold, which allows you to kind of maintain your offensive organization and just kind of steadiness in those non-Steph minutes when he gets back from his injury, obviously. But yeah, that's an example of a move that I'd be looking for, but the options are running out. OG's off the board. Pascal Siakam's off the board. Options are running out. The Warriors got to find something. The NBA season is in full swing, and when I can't get enough of the action on the court, I spice things up by betting on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official partner of the NBA. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. I was looking at the lines for making the playoffs today, and you can get the Lakers at plus 115 to make the playoffs, and the Warriors, check this out, at plus 205 to make the playoffs. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app with code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. New customers can bet $5 on the NBA and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. The crown is yours. All right, moving on to Sixers Nuggets. So, weird game because neither guy wanted to guard each other for until the very end in terms of Jokic and Embiid. I want to start on the defensive end of the floor, though, because really, I think if these two teams were to happen to meet in an NBA Finals series, they would go down guarding each other. They would. That keeping them off each other for the most part was very much a regular season innings eating type of thing. And what do you know? Push comes to shoves, tie game late. They both start guarding each other, right? But I want to start on the defensive end for Philly because the Sixers made the Nuggets do something last night that you don't see the Nuggets do very often. They made them rush, and they made them make mistakes. The Nuggets played 7.5 minutes, with Jokic on the fourth quarter last night, it amounted a 62.5 offensive rating, about half where you'd like to see them be in that situation, right? Forced them into 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter. And it all comes down to, in my opinion, the job they did, specifically Patrick Beverley and Joel Embiid, guarding the Jokic-Murray actions 2-on-2. Really quickly on Patrick Beverley, just did an awesome job on Jamal Murray, specifically with back pressure. Early in the fourth quarter, he had a block on Jamal Murray, late clock situation where he kind of stripped him from behind. And that's one of those plays where, like, it was a late clock situation too. Like Jamal probably misses that shot just because it's a really tough shot. But Pat makes an extra effort. And most importantly, it plants a seed up here. Plants a seed that says, like, you can't see me, but I'm right behind you. And I'm coming. I'm going to be swiping at the basketball. I'm going to be contesting your shot from behind. It gets in the ball handler's head. And what ended up happening is when Jamal was coming off those ball screens, he's typically a very methodical shot creator, right? He's typically a guy that's going to put you in jail, use his size, get to spots that are like 15 feet away from the basket. But in his two-man game at the end of the game, he was just going downhill. The reason being, he's terrified that Patrick Beverley's coming from behind, right? Because he's just such a scrappy player with the way that he competes over the top of screens and can provide that rear view, that back pressure, right? And he ended up turning the ball over twice on these bounce passes where he's just going 100 miles an hour and just throwing like a super quick bounce pass at the guy's knees. And like I want to give Patrick Beverley credit for that because I just haven't seen many players kind of speed up Jamal Murray like that, especially in a high-profile game like that. And then on the Embiid front, one of the things he was doing in the fourth quarter that I thought was really, really smart was he was denying him his usual spots where he catches the ball. We talked about this when the Clippers played the Lakers a few weeks ago when LeBron did the same thing to Kawhi Leonard. A lot of these super strong players, they are really good at creating easy passing windows, right? Like, if you asked me, and I'm a relatively big guy, if you asked me to try to deny Nikola Jokic the basketball, I would have no chance. I'd try to get in front of him, he'd just push down on my back, he'd create an easy over-the-top angle, right? Like, or he'd swim move around and create another angle. And like, I'm 230 pounds, right? Like, he's just so damn big that he makes other big humans look small. But the thing is Joel Embiid's one of the few guys in the league who's actually big enough to contend with Jokic physically. And so he was able to get in front and make it so that there was no passing angle. When he was denying those entries, like to the elbow or on the post, he basically threw the Nuggets offense off and they bailed out of those plays and tried to do other things. There was a play where Jokic was trying to catch the ball at the elbow. Embiid denies him. And so Reggie Jackson goes, oh shit, I got to do something. And he tries to drive downhill and ends up, and then Embiid, this is the crazy part about it, he would be able to deny Jokic and then recover to the rim. He denied Jokic at the elbow. Reggie decides to drive. He just swim moves off of Jokic, gets back and meets him at the rim. Blocks the shot or forces a really ugly miss. There was another one. He's fronting Jokic in the post, denies the post entry, ball gets worked around. Jokic runs up to the perimeter, and Embiid just makes an impromptu switch back onto Aaron Gordon. Patrick Beverley rotates back out to Michael Porter Jr., and then he's back at the rim. And that was one of the ones where Jamal Murray ended up forcing one of those rushed bounce passes, even though Jamal turned the corner, simply because Embiid was waiting at the rim again. So that concept of denying Jokic his normal touches and his normal spots on the floor, and then also getting back and protecting the rim, that literally just threw Denver's offense for a loop. And so, again, we can talk about the offense, and we're going to, but like, to me, the end of that game came down to Joel Embiid, specifically with Patrick Beverley's help, just single-handedly throwing a giant wrench into Denver's offensive process. And that allowed the other three guys to kind of just like gap and recover, right? So like play kind of in that middle ground where they feel comfortable closing out to a shooter while also, digging down and kind of disrupting things inside. And again, held the Nuggets to a 62.5 offensive rating with Jokic on the floor over the final 7.5 minutes of the game. On the other end, continues to handle doubles really well. Another 10 assist night. That's his third time this year that he's had at least 10 assists. Last year, Joel Embiid had just 9 games with at least 7 assists. He already has 13 this year, just halfway through the year. Denver was doubling one pass away in a lot of Embiid's face-up situations, which we'll talk about in a minute because it's a strategy I don't necessarily agree with. But he was just taking what the defense was giving him, throwing those quick one-handed passes to the guy one pass away, and they were playing off of that. And then it really came down to the face-up game. He killed the Nuggets down the stretch with these face-up jab step jumpers. It's a specific shot he's been making at a really high clip this year. He's 35 for 65, so well over 50% on face-up, no dribble jump shots this year. And it just absolutely picked him apart at the end of the game. Was doing it to Aaron Gordon, was doing it to Nikola Jokic from three. It was incredibly dominant. Had a big Euro step in transition around Nikola Jokic for a layup. It was just an unbelievably dominant game from Joel Embiid. And here's the thing. He said after the game to Nikola Jokic, and I appreciated this because it's a respect to the banner. You guys know here, shout out Logan Swaim, head of content here at The Volume. He calls me a loyalist of the banner. But Embiid was being a loyalist to the banner. He goes, Jokic is the best player. And then he said something like, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, which was awesome. It's going to be exciting to see that matchup in Denver. But here's the thing. He's by far the best regular season player in the league. And it's not particularly close. There's nobody in the league right now impacting winning on a night-to-night basis the way that Joel Embiid is over the course of the 82. He is far and away the MVP frontrunner right now. The next step is go beat the allegations. He has a reputation of being a playoff underperformer. It's a combination of two things, in my opinion: injuries and his jump shot failing him. They probably are connected to some extent, right? And Sixers fans are constantly pointing that out, give him a healthy playoff run. He just hasn't really had a chance to show what he can do when he's healthy in that phase. And that may or may not be true, but that's the reputation. The allegations are that he's a playoff underperformer. Go beat them. Go show everybody that they're wrong. And everything will flip like that. Go show everyone that they're wrong. That's all he needs to do. And if it is as simple as him being injured, take care of yourself. Who cares about the MVP this year? Do what you got to do to make sure you're healthy in April. And then when he gets there, it's that jump shot. Because he's shooting extremely well on those jab step jumpers or the no dribble jumpers. But the jumper's basically where it was last year overall. Last year, 0.97 points per Joel Embiid jump shot. This year, 0.98. So he's 1% better than he was last year. The difference is, last year, he went from 0.97 points per jump shot in the regular season down to 0.59 points per jump shot in the playoffs. This has been a consistent theme on Embiid's longer playoff runs. He doesn't shoot the jump shot as well as he did in the regular season, which becomes a cascading effect. Guys no longer have to stunt and deal with that shot, makes them be able to beat him to the spot better when he makes his post moves. It just causes things to fall apart for him offensively. And that's why he goes from looking like the MVP to looking like something significantly worse than that when he gets to that point. And again, injuries play a big role, but get there healthy, beat the allegations. That's the next step for Joel Embiid. I thought Tyrese Maxey had another big night for a high-profile game. I always want to keep an eye on these kinds of games for the young up-and-coming stars because they're reasonable facsimiles of what playoff games look like. He went for 25 points and 9 assists with just one turnover. Had a big driving layup to tie the game in the fourth quarter when they weren't matched up in transition. Good showing. And then Tobias Harris. The Nuggets without Nikola Jokic were making a little run there in the early fourth quarter. And Tobias Harris literally single-handedly kept the Sixers in the game just by attacking the smaller Nuggets players in the post and hitting little short jump shots and shots around the rim. That matchup attacking forward is such an important role in the NBA for that reason. Because there are so many guys on these courts most of the time, especially in those kind of bridge moments. So end of the third, early fourth, end of the first, early second quarter where there's bench players on the floor. There's lots of these smaller players on the floor that you can attack if you have a matchup attacking forward that can get a high quality shot close to the rim or draw a double team and allow you to play out of that. I thought Tobias Harris did a really, really nice job of that in the early fourth quarter. On the Nuggets front, a lot of really uncharacteristic mistakes. That Reggie Jackson drive where he challenged Joel Embiid at the rim, there were 12 seconds on the shot clock. And when he missed it and fell on the floor, the Sixers ran out. That was when Embiid had the Euro step for the layup. And specifically, I think I saw what Reggie was thinking on that play. So think of it like this. If I'm in a drop coverage, I know even if I get off of the screen, if they're in a drop coverage, if I get off the screen, I know there's a guy waiting for me. But I think he saw Embiid denying and was like, oh shit, if I can get around this screen, Embiid's not at the rim, he's denying. So all I have to do is get over the top of the screen and then I'll be at the rim. Well, he underestimated, I think, Embiid's speed. And what was crazy is as he kind of turned the corner, Embiid was already there. And then he still decided to go into him with so much time on the shot clock. So I thought that was bad process. Reggie should have just pulled it out. Not to mention it ended in a switch and Tyrese Maxey was on Jokic. So he could have just, Jokic should have probably crashed there too, because he probably could have got offensive rebound putback. Or, that how Jamal Murray always does that thing where he kind of gets really deep into the lane and then just kind of floats it up in front of the rim and Jokic will go grab it and then shoot his little pop shot, right? So that was kind of a challenging possession. Jamal threw 2 really bad bounce passes on plays where Patrick Beverley was rushing him from behind. On the second one, it was the play where Embiid was denying Jokic in the post, and the ball got worked around and ended up in a Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon ball screen. But Joel Embiid made an impromptu switch back onto Aaron Gordon at the last second, and Patrick Beverley had to rotate out to Michael Porter Jr. There was like a 2-second window there where they ran to Jokic at the top of the key, and Michael Porter Jr. was wide open on the right wing, and Jamal Murray just missed him before he ran in and turned it over. Jokic transition possession, there was a play where Jamal Murray tried to back cut on, I think, Tyrese Maxey, and Jokic just threw a really bad bounce pass. First of all, the back cut wasn't open, and then he also threw a bad pass, and so it just went out of bounds. So that was sloppy. Again, 5 turnovers for the Nuggets in the fourth quarter. And then the defense wasn't very good. They had 2 possessions where they didn't get matched up in transition. The first one, I clipped both of these plays. I took this entire stretch run, by the way, and did a clip-by-clip analysis of it on my Twitter feed at _JasonLT. So you guys can find that there. But because I've had a lot of people in the comments say, hey, Jason, it'd be really nice if we had video underneath the clips. And this is what I'm going to say. I know that. I'd love to have that. Right now, we're not set up for that. That's just the reality. So my counter is every morning when I'm doing a film session, I catalog this, not every morning, but most of the mornings that I do a film session, I'm cataloging these plays in threads on the feed. And so there you can go to try to see some more visual examples of the things I'm talking about. I really hope and I believe that in the long run, we will be able to do that on the show. We're just not at that point right now. So I appreciate the feedback. I promise you guys it's something that I really want to do. It's just a question of logistics at this point, and we'll see when we get to that point. Anyway, though, you can see on this particular transition possession, you can see Jokic screaming to Reggie Jackson, go pick up Tyrese Maxey. What are you doing? Go pick him up. And he just didn't get there in time. Reggie Jackson or Tyrese Maxey just shot down the lane and got a right-handed layup. That was the one that Michael Porter Jr. goaltended. Then there was another one where this one was Jokic's fault. They're running out in transition. It was after the Reggie Jackson forced layup that he missed. Jokic in transition defense is supposed to run to the rim. Instead, he ran out to Patrick Beverley in the corner when no one was at the rim. And so then he had to sprint back into the play when he saw Embiid coming. And it was like a closeout situation in transition. It's just there's no chance. If he's waiting there, he can probably force Embiid to pull it out. He wasn't waiting there. He was sprinting there. That was when Embiid hit him with that Euro step and got to the basket. So 2 bad transition defense possessions led to easy layups. It just... Again, and then the jumpers you got to live with, but they were just sloppy on both ends of the floor. It was an uncharacteristic Nuggets performance. That said, I do want to credit the Sixers because I thought they kind of played the Nuggets into those bad tendencies with really, really good defense, especially by Joel Embiid. Here's the reality. The Sixers are a little bit of a tough matchup for Denver. Embiid is big enough to challenge Jokic physically, like we mentioned earlier, in a way that most NBA centers aren't. There were only 2 possessions in the game where Jokic actually posted up Joel Embiid individually, and he got good looks on both. There was a up and under where he had a left-handed layup that he missed, and then there was a right-handed hook shot that he got that was relatively easily. So hard to say exactly how that matchup would look in a bigger picture at this phase of their careers because they didn't guard each other that much. That said, there's no doubt that Embiid does match up better with Jokic than most of the centers around the league. And then on the other end of the floor, there's just nobody on Denver that can guard Joel Embiid. But the question is, that doesn't matter if Philly's not good enough to get out of the Eastern Conference. Because right now, I would pick Boston and Milwaukee over Philly. So, it's a bad matchup for Denver, but unless Philly makes some sort of trade to provide some more perimeter talent, I just don't necessarily think they're good. Or unless Joel Embiid just goes transcendently great in the postseason, I don't necessarily see them making the finals, which puts them in a situation where Denver might not even have to see that specific matchup. And outside of that, there's just like, he doesn't have any problems with Anthony Davis. I mean, maybe we'll see if Anthony Davis can reverse that trend this year, but he doesn't have any problems with Anthony Davis, doesn't have any problems with any of these other centers out west. Embiid's the one guy who's kind of big enough to kind of challenge him in that sense. Hopefully we'll get to see more examples of them on each other one-on-one when they play in a couple of weeks. A playoff series would be fun to see between those two, wouldn't it? It would get nasty. I think they would end up guarding each other for the most part. That's a series I'd love to see. One other note with Denver, if there was one kind of crack in the armor that's worth calling attention to, it's Jokic's jump shot. Down the stretch of the game, Nikola had, I think, 2 wide open threes. There was at least one in the corner, one at the top, and then maybe one more. But like, he had some wide open looks, and he missed them both. And here's the thing. Last year in the regular season, a Jokic jumper was worth 1.17 points per shot. In the playoffs, it was worth 1.21 points per shot. And as I've talked so much about on the show, over-the-top shot making was a huge part of Denver winning. Like, the Lakers were in every single game of that Western Conference Finals, and then Jokic and Murray shot them out of it at the end. That was a big part of it. There's a highlight reel going around of Jokic just bombing crazy jumpers over the top on their way to winning the title. That was a big part of it. Wasn't the only part, so much more that Denver does well, but that is one of the things that helped them get over the top. This year, a Jokic jump shot is worth just 1.04 points per jump shot. That's in that like LeBron James territory, right? For the record, that's 17% down from where it was last year in the postseason. Not 17% shooting, but 17% relative to where it was last year, from 1.21 down to 1.04. That's roughly 17%, right? So there's a significant decline in Jokic's jump shot. And we saw that the year before last too. And so I would like to see Jokic have an extended stretch of hot shooting before the postseason, just to demonstrate that he still has that in his bag, because I do think it's a very, very important thing to kind of add to that margin of error that Denver has. All right, before we get out of here, let's talk Clippers. Big win against Oklahoma City last night, as I expected. As I told you guys after the Minnesota Timberwolves win, my initial kind of interpretation of the Clippers is they're kind of matchup dependent, and they're going to struggle a lot with a lot of these bigger teams that can kind of bully them. And then they're going to, especially the ones that have good perimeter defenders that can make long perimeter defenders that can challenge Paul George and Kawhi pull-up jump shots. And then I thought they would kind of throttle the other perimeter teams, the other finesse teams, right? And they kind of handled OKC last night, albeit OKC on the tail end of a back-to-back. Paul George was absolutely magnificent down the stretch. He had a huge pull-up jump shot over Jalen Williams, a couple of nasty, tough, tight window, short opening catch-and-shoot jump shots, had a big reverse dunk and transition at the end of the game. It was crazy Paul George performance. But as I said before the Minnesota game, after these two games, I want to add the Clippers to my contender list. And I just wanted to see those two games before we got there. And those two games kind of legitimized most of my beliefs about this team at this point in the season. So let's talk Clippers big picture first. And let's start with the good. They have diversity of shot creation. That's a major thing for me. They have a finesse wing, a power wing, and a pick and roll maestro, right? Paul George is your, a dribble, pull-up shooter guy. Kawhi Leonard is your fight for short range, pull-up jump shots close to the basket that are a little more high percentage, super, super efficient, right? And then James Harden is a guy that can set them up in advantage situations out of pick and roll. They also are an excellent shooting team. They get 1.12 points per spot-up possession, which is the 5th best in the league. And they shoot 39.6% from three, which is the best in the league. In play types, they are the 4th most efficient post-up team in the league. They are the 2nd most efficient ISO team in the league. They are the 7th most efficient pick-and-roll team in the league. On the defensive end, they are 14th in defensive rating, but it's kind of confusing because they're the 4th best half-court defense, according to Cleaning the Glass, but they're the 3rd worst transition defense, according to Cleaning the Glass. So they're a good half-court defense, an atrocious transition defense, which combines to make for an average defense. That said, typically the transition defense is something that can get cleaned up in the postseason. They're excellent on the perimeter. They're excellent on help recover situations. They're just not great in rim protection, but they do protect the paint reasonably well. They are 11th in points in the paint allowed. They are also 12th in three-pointers made allowed. And again, a lot of noise there in terms of transition defense. Here's the bet. I have 3 main concerns. And before I go any further, Every team I have major concerns for, except for Denver. And even with them, I have the Jokic jump shot thing, which I talked about earlier, which is a little bit of a concern. Like Boston and Denver, I have little concerns. I'm a little concerned about Boston's late game decision-making and just overall offensive process. I'm a little bit concerned about Denver as it pertains to Jokic's jump shooting and whether or not he can reach the level he did last year in the postseason. But all the other teams have major concerns. Like Milwaukee's not as good offensively, in my opinion, as they need to be in order to make up for their defensive deficiencies, and their pick and roll or their point of attack defense stuff is a real problem. The Lakers are just lifeless right now, so it's hard to even tell what they're good and bad at. They look terrible one night, awesome the next, and they certainly need to make a trade. They're weak in overall offensive skill. They're weak in kind of perimeter speed. They've got a lot of stuff they got to address at the deadline, right? Like the Phoenix Suns' physicality is a major issue. They fall apart offensively in the fourth quarter as well. Minnesota is a terrible half-court offense. So they're an excellent defensive team, but they can really struggle in the chess match stuff at the end of games. Or in slow down environments. So every team has major issues. So when I talk about these major issues for the Clippers, don't take it as like me trying to pick them apart. I'm trying to pick everybody apart. That's the point. I'm trying to get to the point where I can have a better understanding of this when we get to April. Here are my 3 concerns for the Clippers. 1, they take the second most pull-up jump shots in the league. 2, they're a bottom 10 defensive rebounding team. They give up an offensive rebound on 43.3% of their opponents' misses in clutch situations, too. That's second worst in the league. So they're a bad defensive rebounding team who's incredibly bad in close game situations late. And then 3, they do not score in the paint. They're 17th in points in the paint per game. Now, let's elaborate that on that a little bit. Number 1, they take the second most pull-up jump shots in the league. Why does that matter? Because they hunt and depend on difficult shot making. And that's just a tough way to win in the playoffs. We've seen that with Phoenix. We've seen that with, the Nets teams, right? Like when you rely on difficult shot making, not as a counter, not like late clock situations, being really picky about when you take pull-up jump shots based on the coverage, but like you lean on interior shot making and advantage creation and shots close to the rim and wide open catch and shoot situations and stuff like that. It should be the other way around. Like you should rely on that stuff and then have the pull-up shooting be a counter or something you're more selective with. That to me is the best shot profile for a playoff team. The Clippers are the other way around. They depend and lean into and hunt and rely on difficult shot making. And just what ends up happening a lot of times is like guys that you see make tough shots in the regular season gets more physical, guys start to wear down, the grind of the playoffs takes a toll over 2-3 series, and then suddenly it's like he's just not quite getting as much lift on that pull-up jump shot and he starts to miss them, right? So that's something that's not unique to the Clippers. That's something I talk about around the league. For example, 4 of the 5 champions since Kevin Durant and Steph Curry were playing together for the Warriors and won in 2018, 4 of the 5 champions were low-volume pull-up shooting teams. The one high-volume pull-up shooting team was Milwaukee, and they had Giannis bulldozing to the rim throughout the entire playoff run. It was Chris and Drew taking all the pull-up jump shots. So, NBA history tells us, typically, high-volume jump shooting teams aren't going to be the ones who hoist the trophy at the end of the day. Also, Milwaukee wasn't second in the league in attempts there. Secondly, rebounding. 4 of the 5 teams that won the title since Kevin Durant and Steph hoisted the trophy in 2018 were 11th or better in defensive rebounding percentage. And the Clippers are bottom 10 and absolutely atrocious in clutch situations like we talked about. The one exception, the one team out of that 5 was Toronto with Kawhi Leonard. They were 18th in defensive rebounding, and they were a much better defensive rebounding team than this particular Clippers team is. Lastly, lack of paint scoring is pretty simple. They don't get a lot of easy shots close to the rim. They depend on guys making jump shots. There's more variance in jump shooting. You can control jump shooting for the most part, but there is a variance element to it. And that variance element is not there with around the rim shooting, or at least to a much, much smaller extent. So NBA history tells us that this kind of team construct typically doesn't win. That doesn't mean they won't win. Doesn't mean they can't win. Just means it's less likely, right? As far as the other narrative stuff, like everyone said, James Harden isn't just called a playoff choker, as some sort of caricature of himself. Like it's a basketball thing. He, at this phase of his career, struggles to beat people off the dribble and finish around the rim in a playoff setting when the intensity and physicality goes up a level. Last year, outside of 2 games, was downright atrocious in the playoffs. And so that doesn't mean it can't happen. And again, Philly fans will tell you he was hurt, coming off of an Achilles thing that was bothering him during the regular season. I don't want to deny that, but we have a long extended sample that when we get to that level, James's efficacy drops a level. It's worth mentioning. Not the end all be all, but it's worth mentioning. So the question is, where do they go in my list of contenders? So right now I have Denver at 1, Boston at 2, Milwaukee at 3. I've decided that the teams below that have bigger question marks. The Lakers have to nail their trade, have to rebuy in. By tricking off the regular season, they put themselves in a situation where if LeBron or Anthony Davis suffer a significant injury, they will miss the playoffs. So like they've removed their margin for error. The Warriors, same thing, have to nail a bunch of trades. Minnesota's half-court offense, I think, is a real issue. I think they're going to run into some problems where they get absolutely shut down at some phases of the playoffs. So I'm putting the Clippers in at number 4. Also, I want to add Oklahoma City and Philly to this list eventually, but I want to do some deep dives on film and some numbers with them. So I'm going to wait until further down the line to do so, but I will be adding Oklahoma City and Philly to that as well. But Clippers, right now, my 4th leading championship contender. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you supporting the show. Don't forget, tonight after Mavericks-Lakers, we'll be going live on YouTube, and then tomorrow we'll pick like 1 or 2. But I think I'm going to hit, it's Bucks-Cavs tonight too on ESPN. So I'll hit like Bucks-Cavs tomorrow, and we'll do a mailbag as well. So I will see you guys then. I appreciate you guys. See you tomorrow.